Oh, the year was 2018, and Intuit had just kind of done some stinky stuff. No, it was 2019, and we were like, "Can we run our firm without Intuit products?" At that point, we were using all the stuff that you would expect that most firms still use from Intuit, and we're like, "Well, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens." And it took us on a journey of self discovery that I wasn't quite expecting. And the lessons we learned from that they were super valuable, but impacted the business in ways that maybe we didn't expect. So today, I'm not interested in dunking on Intuit so much as telling you like what our transition was, the benefits we saw, and how that kind of changed my thinking about how we ran our firm. So come on in, let's talk about it. Okay, that's right. It was 2019. Intuit at the time was getting sued over the whole free file thing. So they had basically a free version of TurboTax, but through some kind of dodgy marketing funnels, ended up making a lot of people pay for TurboTax that probably should not have. But by all accounts, that seemed like a totally legitimate lawsuit. They ended up settling a few years later for $141 million. And that same year, November 2019, they launched QuickBooks Live Bookkeeping. That is, they have their own bookkeepers who will do the books for folks, and that was probably the single biggest shot across the bow to like accounting professionals from this kind of current crop of Intuit leadership. And it was a combination of those two things. And there were, in the beginning, there were some issues with advertising of the QuickBooks Live bookkeeping service happening to users, like QuickBooks users, client users that were connected to an accountant. And we're like, you got to be kidding. Like they've invited us to their QuickBooks file and you're actively advertising to them that you will do their books. Eventually, they rolled that back so that those ads wouldn't be displayed if the QuickBooks account was connected to an advisor, but they still ran ads on the login screen. So like the easy workaround there was just when you're logging in on the other panel, there were ads for like, hey, we'll do your books for you. So what did we do at the time? At the time, we were using Lacert for tax prep. The firm had been on Lacert for over 20 years, and this was happening around TICJA, so a whole ton of tax law changes, and we were frankly concerned about like the fundamental infrastructure of Lacert and whether it was actually capable of doing some new sort of multi-year complex things that were necessary with TICJA. It didn't seem like it was going in a good direction. Not that any tax software was going in a good direction, but we had some concerns there. So we started shopping around. We ended up changing to UltraTax, which in many ways is just a different kind of awful, but it had some other stuff like multi-monitor support, and I still believe it's for small firms with the budget for UltraTax. It is probably the best platform for small firms, unless you have muscle memory on a different one, like Access Tax or something like that. If you came from a bigger firm, the biggest thing with tax prep productivity is muscle memory. So I don't want to discount that, and we paid for that big time. It took years for a whole bunch of Lacert tax pros to get efficient on UltraTax. Like in hindsight, it sucked, but I think that was the right decision. In fact, it was interesting. Mike Sylvester tweeted the other day, shout out to Intuit, the makers of Lacert. We've been using Lacert for over 20 years. The number of times per day the partners have to close Lacert due to Lacert errors is just out of control, over and over, 10 to 20 times a day. Yes, we have a local server. The problem is not our server. It is Lacert, and Intuit agrees with us. And this is classic, Mike. Intuit, stop advertising on football games and put some money into your gosh darn software. I mean, none of these software platforms are really getting any investment. Like they're getting upkeep and maintenance to work correctly and change with the rules, but the platforms themselves, like they're not getting any investment. So we made this decision at the end of 2019, and the 6 months that followed, that a few months later in the Super Bowl was when they ran the TurboTax All People Are Tax People ad. Honestly, that commercial absolutely slaps, but understandably tax pros weren't super jazzed about that. And so it just from a business standpoint, it just seemed kind of risky to be super, super in with Intuit when we didn't quite know where Intuit was headed. And like for context, the Brad Smith, so former CEO of Intuit, the Brad Smith era of Intuit was very advisor first, and that was kind of how QuickBooks began. And this is all very, very North American centric conversation. Like this is not the case anywhere else in the world, and the rest of the world is kind of like very confused by American fixation with QuickBooks, because I've actually got the data right here. This is as of 2021. It's the most up-to-date data I could find. In the US, as of 2021, 65% of small businesses were on QBO, 15% were on QuickBooks Desktop. Then you had a long tail of others. I imagine that QBO percentage has gone up quite a bit since then, from 65% to even more. But in the same period, 2021, in Australia and New Zealand, QuickBooks only represented 10% of the accounting software market share, and in the UK, only 20%. So Americans, for some reason, like to act like there aren't any other alternatives, like nothing else will do. The rest of the world isn't using like archaic accounting systems. There's plenty of other platforms out there. It's just that QuickBooks became synonymous for accounting in the US. Like it was just what you did. You went to church, you went to Costco, you bought QuickBooks from the little cardboard display, and then you went home and you watched the NASCAR race. But Intuit has changed from the Brad Smith days. The current Sasan Goodarzi kind of leadership approach, he's their current CEO. He's said over and over again that Intuit is becoming a, quote, done-for-you company. So not just the software platform, but like an assisted version of that. And we saw that first in their TurboTax products, where when someone is doing this self-serve sort of tax preparation, going through the steps and all that, you can like tap a pro to hop on a call with you or get a second set of eyes on something. And it's just a really seamless experience. And honestly, like it's like they're crushing it. Like they're making tremendous, really, really good consumer products and finding a lot of success with that. And that's the focus of the company. That's what investors are excited about, and like that's what they've doubled down on. And I always say to US tax pros, like imagine a US tax system without TurboTax. How are all those people getting their taxes done? There's other platforms, but they're like far inferior to TurboTax. TurboTax works well. And like the last thing we all need to do is try to like hungry hippos up a whole bunch of W-2 tax returns that are incredibly simple. Honestly, that like the opposite will happen. And it's probably a good thing, where the productized services continue to come up market, which pushes us up market, which is where we need to be anyways. Not working on, $500 tax returns or, 5 years ago, $80 tax returns. The software platforms, frankly, can have that type of work, and AI will absolutely push that productization forward. So that's just the state of Intuit right now. And it's not anybody's fault. They're making really good consumer stuff. And so the accountant channel, that's just not the focus of the company. It's still part of their business, and they're still maintaining a lot of those products. And you still have an entire accountant channel full of great people at Intuit who are well-meaning people, but ultimately not the ones behind the wheel. And so they've got an incredibly challenging job to, kind of serve as the buffer there. And, every year there's always something that Intuit does that makes accounting pros upset. We had the tax pro breakup commercial this last year that was a pretty big deal. This one was in pretty poor taste because the tax pro in the commercial was kind of made to look like a dummy. To me, it was more egregious than the all people are tax people one, just because of the framing of the tax professional is like very old fashioned and all that. I honestly, like right now, it's a sad time for tax pros, because you're like, who can we hitch our wagon to give us the next awesome suite of professional tax products? Take a pick, go down the list. Thomson Reuters, CCH, Drake. Not an exciting list, right? I mean, the thing about this is Intuit is in the driver's seat to deliver the most phenomenal set of professional tools we could possibly have. It doesn't seem like the motivation is there to do it, but imagine Intuit at their best building a super cool pro suite. In fact, I kind of had high hopes that they would develop this almost just for their own uses, because they have to use something internally, as Intuit is increasingly kind of becoming a firm in many ways. But at the moment, the closest thing we have to this is Intuit Pro Connect, which is a SaaS-based tax prep platform that still does not go anywhere near the length of like an UltraTax and what it's capable of doing. They've got a tax planning product, which is a little bit half-baked. And so they've shipped some stuff, but all the other SKUs Intuit has, from Lacert to what's the other desktop-based one? Pro Series? Why am I thinking Pro Series? Whatever the other Intuit tax product is. I mean, these things are all like on life support and an afterthought for Intuit, which is a hard place, scary place for you to set up your business. And that's ultimately where we made the decision to proactively change, because it was clear that like this wasn't Lacert wasn't gonna get any love from Intuit. It was unclear where Intuit was going in regards to their relationship with the kind of accounting category as a whole. And I think, like in hindsight, like I think that was the right move for my firm, last year, The Verge did an interview with Sasan Goodarzi, their CEO, that went a little bit weird, and then Intuit actually came back and asked for them to remove part of the interview. I think the conversation was around that free file lawsuit and just a disagreement there. But one of the things Sasan said here is that many people actually want somebody else to do their taxes for them because of confidence. They fear getting it wrong. They want to make sure they're getting the largest refund. If the IRS comes after them, they want to make sure somebody's there to protect them. So they'll always want to have an expert do their taxes for them. So we believe that over time, we'll still have a mix of free, we'll have a mix of paying customers, but I think over time, our largest growth will come from disrupting what today is the assisted category. And that was where the interview ended. So their goal is disrupting what many tax pros do right now. He says the assisted category, which is a little different than the done for you category that like tax pros, that's more of a done for you sort of thing. And they've kind of created the assisted category here. Like if you think about it, the user comes in and does a lot of the work themselves in the platform and then kind of gets some help, which is kind of a cool, like collaborative way to do it. Tax pros, we don't have the tools. Like there's not a platform that would enable us to do something like that. Maybe you can argue that tax intake tools are a little bit of that because clients are uploading their documents, but they're not going through like a huge exhaustive checklist most times like you would have to do in a TurboTax to collect every single little detail to complete the tax filings. Today's episode is sponsored in part by TeamUp, the folks that help you hire people directly in the Philippines to work for your accounting firm. TeamUp's put together a killer guide, actually a 2025 salary guide for hiring accountants in the Philippines that you can swipe for free down in the show notes. One thing they called out in this guide that I wanted to cover today, what it means to direct hire, because a lot of offshore groups, you're actually hiring the company and they have an office and they have kind of this resource pool of people that are getting work done. TeamUp, their approach, you hire those people directly. So TeamUp pays recruiters on the ground in the Philippines to find those people to come and work for you, which means they're just another member of the team. If you run a distributed team, they are no different than the folks that you got across town. Now, there's sometimes like disclosure rules, stuff like that you got to navigate. But in terms of like building a workplace environment, they're just part of the squad. It means there's no like middleman that can complicate that relationship or anything like that. It means the culture and the relationship that you have with them, it is not entangled in any other stuff that's going on, in their office or, the aspects of their work experience that you don't have control over. Like, it's just you hiring a person to do work. Simple as that. The salary guide, super good. Grab that down in the show notes. And thanks to TeamUp for sponsoring this episode. Gang, today's episode is sponsored in part by the fine folks at Carbon. Every year, Carbon does a report about AI and its impact on the accounting industry. They survey a whole bunch of accounting firms. You may have heard, we actually did a whole episode of the podcast about it. It's a really, really good report. Bunch of interesting insights from real accounting firms to see how they're using it, what's working, what's not working, and kind of get the commentary on either ends of the spectrum. A lot of really interesting trends that developed just in 2025. A whole lot less fear in 25 than there was in 24. People seeing it more as an opportunity. Still a very big divide in the excitement of leadership versus staff level folks. It means we as leaders need to be doing a better job communicating and normalizing AI as a part of work so that it's not this amorphous, spooky thing that folks kind of are unsure of. Lots of exciting stuff happening there. I'll link access to that AI report down in the show notes. Totally worth checking out. I think you'd like it. So we moved off of Intuit stuff back then, leaving Lacert, but then also leaving QuickBooks when it came to how we got our internal bookkeeping done. Not internal like for the firm, but like when we would manage the books for clients, we stopped using QuickBooks for that. And so the background of our firm was, it was an 80-year-old tax firm. I bought into it. It was either that year or the next year. Bought out a couple of the partners. So it was me and a partner. And then I launched a CAS practice, and we grew from being a team of about 25 to a team of about 40. So about a third of the business, just over a third of the business by the time I was out of there was the CAS practice. So we were doing books and back office stuff for clients. And the other 2/3 or so was a tax business. So we ended up running the whole CAS business on zero. We still did a lot of work with QuickBooks because we had maybe 800 once a year tax clients, small business clients that is, who would show up with their books. And the vast majority of the time that was on QuickBooks. 75% of the time it was on QuickBooks. The other 25, it was on a napkin or a spreadsheet or roll of toilet paper or whatever those people brought. And when we we had all this like trepidation about making this switch, as I think we sometimes, I don't know, we get nervous about changing something that clients may be upset about, right? First thing that we learned when we did that switch to our in-house books being managed on Xero, and some of these clients we had already been managing on QuickBooks, we moved them over. First thing we learned, nobody really cared. Like nobody gave a hoot. Like these people for who we were doing like done for you books, they were like, yeah, whatever, like whatever gets it done. I don't really care. Second thing that happened is we ended up with a whole bunch of staff that were like big time Xero enthusiasts. Like it would just totally grind their gears to have to use any other accounting platform. But to be totally honest, I think this is also just a muscle memory thing. All the people that use QuickBooks all the time, when they have to fire up Xero, they're like, that says awful. How do I find and do, why doesn't it have this feature? Honestly, I think that's just a product of what do you do? What do you use most? Because the people on both sides of that, they say the other thing, or they say that about the other platform whenever they have to infrequently use it. Third thing we learned, and this was a big one, is it started actually a mindset shift in the entire firm from we're just going to do whatever people bring to us to we actually know a lot more about the right way to do this. And so we're actually going to tell them, here's the better way that we think you should do this. So examples of that is like proactively communicating what the better banking platforms were for our clients. At the time, that was Relay was the first one in the space there. It was putting them on better bill pay platforms. Back in 2019, that would have been Bill.com and Melio. Because most of our clients, I mean, a huge percentage of them were writing a bunch of paper checks. And the ones that were trying to do something cooler, many of them were using the bill pay solution from their banks, which were just awful. So we're trying to get them set up on kind of better bill pay platforms, even down to how clients would gather their info to provide it to us for a month-end closer for tax prep. This firm had been around for 80 years and they had never gone as far as doing anything more than sending out a paper organizer. Like we didn't instruct people on the best ways to gather this stuff up when it's like, think of how many tax returns we've done and how just giving them a few pointers on the better way to do this would probably be worth doing. But we were so afraid of telling someone what to do. We were so afraid of pushing the client to do something outside of just what they wanted to do that like we wouldn't have even considered that previously. And so we ended up giving them much more structured ways to provide info to us. And you still see this in a vast spectrum of this in firms, from the people who are like, my clients would hate a client portal. And like it is 100% put on the client to come up with how they want to give you that stuff. And sometimes we will frame that as white glove. And sometimes it is a more premium service. But sometimes it's just kind of being lazy or being scared to just tell them something that they may not agree with. And so where we landed was, we're going to tell you what we think the best way for you to do this is. You can disagree. And frankly, it's still fine if you want to do it a different way. But simply saying, here's what we recommend, 80% of the people are like, okay, cool. Like, obviously, you know this better than me, so I'm just going to go with what you say. And for some reason, and maybe this is more generationally just kind of the older way of running a professional services firm, for whatever reason, we had never even thought to be like, hey, here's some recommendations for XYZ. We just thought that these people would, I don't know, they would get it however they would get it and send it over, and we could somehow like build an efficient workflow around that. Last, kind of the fourth product of this was we just ended up with a more intentionally designed approach to serving clients. As a result of being more opinionated, we felt like we had more agency in how those engagements came together. As we were onboarding a new client, we would end up being pretty opinionated then about the platforms that they ought to use as a result. And again, they wouldn't always agree with us, but most of the time they would happily get out of the way because they're like, you're literally the expert. And if I'm not going to lean into that expertise, I'm not going to capture the value of what I'm paying for. We do this for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies. Who do you do this for? Like the entrepreneur has the perspective of one. And I think we can sell ourselves short by not sharing that information that would really help them out because we don't realize what valuable perspective we do have. Our firm got comfortable with having a level of selectivity as a result that we had never had before, where we could see the clients, when we start putting that information in front of them, it made it more clear what clients were kind of sponges and willing to take that expertise and get value from that expertise versus the clients who weren't. And for the clients who weren't, there ended up being this friction of, well, they're not valuing what we give them, which that actually explains why they complain about the bill and we can't charge them as much and all that. So it kind of shone a light on who our best fit clients were, but then also the opposite. And so we had, I guess, a more clear path and a more clear way to identify clients that weren't a great fit for the firm. And so these four things, we learned that nobody cared when we changed. It would have been different if we said all of the clients who bring us their books once a year, you have to change to a different platform. Because in that case, the clients were doing the books. That's very different. That's a much harder hill to climb. We changed the accounting ledger for the books that we were doing for clients. But the first thing we learned was nobody cared when we did change it. Second was our team fell in love with the platform that we used, but that was just a product of comfort level, I think. Third thing we learned was that we're actually doing our clients a service by being a little bit more opinionated and telling them, like, here's a better way to manage banking and bill pay and all these different things. And then fourth, it just led to a fundamentally more intentionally designed service delivery where we're like, hey, here's kind of the best way to get from A to Z. And people were more than happy to plug into that. You'll have a few outliers who will complain, and those people take up too much headspace. But by and large, people were perfectly happy to plug into that. Four really valuable things from my firm. And honestly, those four things, they have absolutely nothing to do with Intuit. But until we made that change, we didn't really learn those lessons. So whatever that change is for you, I mean, you could be an Australian firm who's making this change to QuickBooks because QuickBooks is really marketing hard in Australia right now. Whatever that change could be for you, just remember, like, the most important lesson I took out of that whole exercise was the agency we had that we didn't realize we had because we were afraid to acknowledge that we're the experts and it's okay for us to be opinionated. And there's a super rigid version of that where you slap the client's hand if they don't do things just the way that you want them to. But there's also a version of that where I'm like, I'm going to tell you the way that I would recommend you to do this. You can still go your own path if you want. It's just going to be a little harder to support you. And if it blows up in your face, I frankly, I won't feel bad for you. So I'm not going to like get on my horse in 2025 and say nobody should use Intuit products because the kind of the weird situation we're in right now is if anybody's going to be the savior for building a really good suite of tax products for tax pros, there are a few other groups working on it that are a ways out, but they do not have the horsepower and the connection and the context of Intuit. I'm not going to like get on my horse and tell everybody that they shouldn't use Intuit products in 2025. It's definitely complicated, right? When I talk with the Intuit people, I try to really communicate what an opportunity it is to keep working with pros, how Intuit is really in the driver's seat to do something compelling that other companies aren't in a position to do. So you got to decide that for yourself. But I think what stops people from doing anything, or they just get mad and do nothing, is they don't yet feel that sense of agency. They may not realize that they have. Or you may have a team that's in love with the tool set that you use right now. That may lead you to believe that it's fundamentally superior when it's like, no, that's actually just a comfort level thing. And does it hurt to retrain on a new thing, be it an accounting ledger or a practice management system or whatever it is? Like, yeah, that takes time. That costs real money and productive output. But at the end of the day, you're in the driver's seat. Like, you are totally in control. Even in situations where that may create a little bit of friction or confusion with your clients to say, like, why are we going from this platform to that platform? Why are we not using Bill anymore and using this other kind of more modern platform? A whole bunch of examples of that in how we run our firms. But the speed at which we do that, I think if we're faster to do that, that helps us long term because making that change that gets you to a better place, it kind of sets you on that improvement timeline sooner. And so if you made that change now that you were thinking about and may push off another 6 months, if you instead made that change now, coming out of tax season or whenever, then the questions and the things you're thinking about 6 months from now, they're higher level questions, higher level considerations than if this decision gets pushed back. So I think we kind of need to be biased to action, whatever that means for you. Again, not an Intuit thing. It could be going to Intuit. Could be going to a ProConnect for your tax stuff because it's the only SaaS-based tax software that you could actually use. The big thing I want people to hear is like, I think we have more control than we think we do. What clients think about our workflows and all of that takes up more headspace than it should because we know best. Like client's not going to tell me how to run my tax business. And so at the end of the day, you're in control. That's the greatest gift of running your own accounting firm is agency, to not be under the thumb of somebody else and not have to take orders from your boss when you're like, "No, dude, I totally know a better way to do this." And they're like, "Well, this is the way we've always done it." You left that. That's why you left, so you could do your own thing. So don't let your clients tell you what to do. Don't let the allure of being a quote unquote, firm that uses X platform, don't let that pin you down. Do what you want to do. Otherwise, what's the point of all this, right? That was without a doubt the biggest lesson we took out of making that transition. And it kind of changed the mindset of a lot of the folks on the team for whom, when we first talked about that it was unthinkable. And they were like, how am I ever going to learn another tax system? And the very first time they used UltraTax, it was like, okay, be ready for me to take 10 times as long to prepare a tax return. And we're like, we get it. It's going to take time. But honestly, on the other side of that, everybody had a different level of belief in their own ability to change. They saw that the clients, by and large, would kind of get in line and be like, okay, tell me what you think is going to be best. And that scary conversation we built up in our head is just that. It's just in our head. And usually when you actually have that conversation, the person's perfectly reasonable. I mean, so many types of conversations are this way, from price increases to changing the scope of an engagement. If you just the moment you make the decision you need to do that, if you just stopped what you're doing and made that phone call, then you would save yourself so much stress. But it's just one of those things that we build up in our heads. So remember, it's your hands at 10 and 2. You're the one at the wheel. And that's kind of the coolest part about running an accounting firm, right? This is a very, very divisive one. If you got any thoughts, drop them down in the comments. Thanks for coming to be here today. Toodaloo!